With that, I'll call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, October the 9th. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move the agenda be approved as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. We have two delegations here today. First being the Canmore Museum, and Mr. Nickerson, you're presenting. The podium is yours. He never was able to manage these PowerPoints, was he?
Thank you. I use a Mac. I'm not used to this PC.
What? Mac?
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. My name is Andrew Nickerson. I have recently taken over as Chair of the Board for the Canmore Museum. I have a couple of colleagues here with me from the board today. Tony Tier, who's our Treasurer. Andrew Holder, who is our past chair, who many of you will know already, and of course Councillor Seeley is also our council representative on the board. Wanted to just run a few kind of updates around the museum and where we're at the moment, and give you a chance to do a little bit of a Q&A just to see where we're going. So there's a few different areas that we're going to cover in the presentation today. First and foremost, we're very, very excited that we have a new executive director, Jason Gerapi, just in the back there. Jason's first day is today, so we're not actually going to put him on the spot and put him in the firing line. He did volunteer, but we're just going easy on him.
We love to grill people on their first day.
Oh, we know. So anyway, we're very excited about him coming on board. He joins us. He's just moved to town as of yesterday, and we're really looking forward to seeing where he's going to be able to take the museum over the coming months and years. A few other things that just want to use this opportunity to make sure that you're aware of. We have the great exhibit that we started following on from the in-house flood that we had here, the exhibit called From Coal to the Community. Hopefully you've all had the chance to come in and see it. And it's something that we really want the community to be able to come in and get engaged with and have a chance to see themselves. A couple of years ago that we acquired some new off-site storage space. So as a museum, working very hard with people such as Rick Green, previous benefactor, which allowed us to be able to take this forward. We've also been developing some multi-year sponsorships with a couple of key organisations, the Calgary Foundation, who currently give us a $40,000 commitment, and Lafarge, who we have a $50,000 agreement with, that's helping to drive our school programs with school kids up and down the valley. Also very excitingly, last month we hosted the Alberta Museum Association conference here in town. So it was great to have a couple of hundred delegates coming in, getting to see the town itself, use the facilities here, and seeing both the exposure for the town and the museum, and of course the economic impact from the conference itself. Ongoing activities that we have going in the community. So I don't know if you're aware, we have school programs that are being run with grade 3s, 4s and 6s. And this is all the kids from Morley through to Banff are coming in and doing programs with the museum that are age appropriate. This is funded through the Lafarge program, so it's a great opportunity to get people exposed to the history and geology particularly of the area. We have ongoing tours with Jerry Stevenson. Jerry's been running the mine tours now for some years. So we had 8 different tours go out this year with a couple of hundred people going through it. And then we do various other things throughout the course of the year. The roving geoscience program, usually we do up at Grassy Lakes. This year we moved down to the Riverside Park. And coming up things like this coming Saturday, we have the Rock and Fossil Clinic going on here in the Civic Centre as part of the Wild Festival. We also have, I'll just make awareness of it right now, our second annual museum fundraiser next Wednesday night, which is the Coal Shaker. And again, hopefully you and other members of the community will get to come out and engage a little bit, learn a little bit more about what we're doing. Just in terms of a few numbers, last year we had 14,000 visits coming through the museum itself. We had a further 7,500 people coming through the barracks, which we managed down on Main Street. We've had 1,500 children go through the school programs over the course of a year. So again, it's a great opportunity to be able to showcase this to the local children. And then smaller numbers going through the Roving Scientist program and through the mine tours that Jerry's been operating. Now, the really exciting thing looking forward is we're starting to ask the question and say, what is the museum going to look like, not just next year, but to say, what does it look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future? There's a great opportunity to now say, take the history as we see it now, which is primarily based on the mining and geoscience in the current museum, and be able to look and say, how do we take on the history of the whole valley? How do we take on the people here, the environment, everything going through the mines, through the Olympics, right the way to the current day, and keeping that going forward? And what are we going to need to do in order to be able to get there? When we look 20 years down the line, hopefully we're in a much larger kind of facility than we have right now. So this gives us the opportunity to say, what does that look like? What are we going to need to get there? So what's the infrastructure that's going to be required? What are the facilities? And then what's the funding model that's going to be able to drive us forward? As we look at those things, we're looking at how do we create that really compelling experience. We get some fabulous feedback from the current museum right now. People come in and usually we hear words like, I had no idea, or great fun little museum. But that's the problem. There is a lot of people who just, even within town here, who don't know where the museum is, what the museum is, and haven't had the opportunity to come in and engage. So what we want to do is be able to create that really compelling experience that people know about and people are going to be coming and finding. We use the tagline with the museum of where history comes to life, and we want to be able to make that happen and really embrace that in everything that we're doing. At the same time, we want to be able to take the education programs that we've been running, keep those going, keep those very robust, and we want to become far more sustainable. So a big remit of Jason's new role is going to be looking at how we create our self-generated revenues and really increase those from where they are in the current day. And then at the same time looking at the effective use of the resources we have, so the space we have in the museum here, the barracks facility, and then potentially with the restoration of the lamp house at some stage later on. So that's looking future at the vision. I'm going to invite Tony up to speak a little bit to the numbers.
I'll try not to speak very long about numbers because they bore just about everyone. But I think the second last line...
they don't bore councillors. No, sir.
Well, I've certainly circulated them to you. But what we want to do as a museum, as a public space, we're very reliant on grants, both from the town, the very support grants you've given us for a long period of time, and outside grants. 2/3 of our revenues right now come from grant sources, and 1/3 come from self-generated income. We want to change that model over time, but it's not going to happen quite quickly. So that's the main reason we are asking for an increase in our support from the town. We're requesting $180,000 this year and $185,000 in the following year, with a plan to move on a cost of living or a generic increase over the next several years after that. And what we really want to do is encourage our new director to increase self-generated revenues to the point where we will be able to more reliably sustain our future growth. And at this point, we have supplied the information about where we think we'll be at the end of this year, and our surplus over deficit and then surplus over the next 4 years. Again, because we rely so heavily on grants, these are fairly difficult to predict, but that's what we think will happen based on the grants we are currently looking at. This is a breakdown of where our income has come from this year and where we expect it to continue to go. And again, the town is about 40% of this revenue model, reducing in the years 2021 to 22 down to 39. We hopefully will be able to do better than that, but that's our forecast at this point in time. And most of our expenditures are on two fundamental things, being salaries and wages and our administrative costs to keep our building operating. I would be open to both of us would be open to any questions you might have on our request and where we're going and where we've been.
Thank you very much. I had a question for Mr. Nickerson. You noted the ongoing sponsorship from Lafarge and the Calgary Foundation. How far out into the future do you see that being at the table? The Calgary Foundation grant was a one-year grant over a two-year period, but it was one grant of $40,000. Calgary Foundation is very open to future requests. Lafarge has given us $50,000 over a 5-year period, $10,000 a year over the 5 years. And we're hoping to get some engagement with them about extending that and expanding it. They're very engaged with the students that are going through the program. Great. So when does the 5-year period with Lafarge?
It ends at the end of this 4-year cycle with 22.
Okay. So I guess that's why the project grant line goes down over the next 4 years.
The grant lines go down over the next excuse me, over 21 and 22, primarily because we're looking out that far. We don't know. We get grants for projects, so if the project is available to us, we'll have increases in the budget line below, but we're not forecasting grants that we don't think are within sight over those 2 years.
Sure, of course, that makes good sense. Just curious how the board and administration currently feel about the benefit of the gift shop. I mean, it's showing some return, but not huge. Is it still seen as a good use of the space?
This is going to be something with Jason coming in his new role as executive director, is looking at that overall picture of self-generated revenues. Right now, the gift shop forms a part of that. There may be opportunities to change that space, work in the future, change the way retail works. That's part of the long-term process that he's going to be going through.
So it might be that the museum will find a different use for that space. It's
potentially.
Yeah. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation. The increase in your wages and benefits line, does that allow you to increase your benefits for your staff? Can you just tell us more about what your vision is for benefits?
We have introduced the benefits program last year, and this will be the first full year of that benefit program being introduced. I think we have a fairly reasonable benefit program for our staff. Most of that increase is about our change. A lot of the increase is about our change in our director, and included in that, of course, is the additional benefits.
Okay, so you've already improved your benefits program?
We have.
Because I sat on the board a few years ago, and that was a significant issue. So that's been addressed?
It has been a significant issue, and we have addressed it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. I just have a couple questions. One, how many active members do you have?
We've got a little over 120 active members right now. Again, it's an area that we see as that real opportunity to be able to increase going forward. So part of, again, Jason's new role is going to be an outward reach within the community and looking to drive that membership and get it back up to the levels it was kind of 5 years ago.
Okay. And what would your membership include? Like, you can go into the museum as many times as you want, or what's involved in that?
Yeah, it's and there's communications that we do, so newsletters, there's outreach in terms of different talks that we do, different programs throughout the course of the year. So it's communications around those, and then yes, absolutely, coming into the museum as many times as you'd like during the year. We have both single and family memberships as well.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have another question? So just in regards to the budgeted increase in town support, you mentioned that was an average of 3% a year, or what was it?
Going forward from 2019, it's about a little under 3% a year.
Okay, Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Nickerson, can you, a lot's happened since Mr. McIntosh became the executive director and moved things forward. In this presentation, it talks about the investment in executive staff. Can you just go through, outline what that looks like?
So we've hired the new executive director as discussed, and now it's looking at making sure there was the right compensation package for him to be on board, which is a first year increase in budget, and then kind of smaller increases as Tony's already spoken to. And then long term, it's him looking at how the staff resources are deployed with regards to being able to meet the ongoing targets for the organisation.
And you have additional staffing that have been brought on by Mr. McIntosh, and I think the picture looks quite a bit better than it did a few years ago. Yeah,
so we have there's really a staff of 4 that are working there on a full-time or strongly part-time basis. So we have collections manager and collections assistant, and then we have a front of house manager who's directing the programs for the education as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. So, of course, this will be coming as part of the budget approval process in council, and I understand it's not looking pretty so far. So it's going to be a tight year budget-wise, but this will certainly be discussed at that time, and we'll see where it goes.
Excellent.
So thanks very much for being here to present, and welcome to Jason out there. We did meet at the Hoe. It seemed like an appropriate place to meet the new director of the museum. Great, thanks very much, gentlemen.
Thank you for the time, appreciate it.
Are people still calling it the Hoe?
The half Hoe.
What?
Just do your job. Half inch. Oh. I said just do your job.
It's the Hoe. Okay, we have another delegation from artsPlace. Jeremy, welcome. The podium is yours. We're not going to go quite so easy on you. Yeah, right. Yeah, you didn't put any pictures of me in your package. No soup for you.
You can drive. And then you just use the arrows to go through. Yeah?
I can't see my notes. So
Oh, you can't.
Can't see your
Oh, you
nose?
can see your nose.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I don't know
Nose.
how that works.
Shoot presentation mode, but I was just looking at it with my.
Right there in the middle of his face. How can you not see his nose?
Show, presenter view.
There you go. That's the one. There we go.
But you know what? It shows it up there.
That's not good.
Is that okay?
No, if you should, it shouldn't if you. Oh,
That I don't know how to do.
no.
Oh, I know.
I guess not.
Yeah, I think they're not
No,
set up with
just,
separate screens.
Where's IT when you need it? There we go. So you're gonna have to wing it? You can't see your notes?
I'm going to wing it.
Okay. We'll throw some oddball questions at you.
Thank you all, Council, for this opportunity to speak.
Good start.
Thanks.
Good start.
Yeah. I feel naked without my notes, but anyway. I was going to print them off, but then I ran out of time. So anyway, I will not take up a lot of your time, hopefully. I've met with many of you earlier in the year, and I think I have distributed our annual report to everyone, which outlines a lot of our successes, certainly in 2017, and tells some kind of compelling stories about how we've been able to engage effectively with the community as well too. But I think what I'd like to do today is just to cover off where we are organizationally, kind of what strategically where we're looking at going forward, and to kind of speak to the budget request that we've made as well too. So you can see in these numbers that it was a very, very successful year for us. We presented over 500 different programs through the year, which ranged everything from movies and live performances across many musical genres and art forms, to gallery exhibitions and single session workshops and full courses in the visual arts. We engaged over 20,000 individuals. Now obviously there's a bit of overlap in there, so some people took multiple programs, but I think these numbers are a tremendous indication of the success and the way that community has been able to engage with artsPlace effectively.
So what's the difference between registered participant and registered visit?
So that takes into consideration people who are taking multi-week courses.
So are participants the same as visits?
So if you think of 20,532 people who have made a transaction with us in terms of registering for a program, some of those programs involved multiple visits. So
okay.
Say, for instance, if you took a ceramics course, just as a random example, you would come 10 times. So that's the difference.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. One of the other, I would say, successes of the year is we were able to put together what is our strategic map. So this really outlines kind of what our aspirations are as an organization, the impact that we want to have on the community, who our stakeholders are, kind of the operational needs that we need to be successful, and the enablers that will allow us to achieve this success. So this really operates as a framework for our strategic planning going forward, but it also acts as a way that we can effectively measure our success as an organization as well too. So roughly speaking, our strategic plan involves three main tranches, and that is really what I would call participation in organizational growth, but sustainable participation in organizational growth. And that growth will be achieved through a balanced and a sustainable financial model. And a big part of that, of course, is our fundraising capacity as an organization. So the big part of the thing that's really driving our growth that we're projecting going forward is a very extensive community consultation process that we're currently in the middle of. We actually have. Actually, I'll speak to this a little bit later. But I think one of the reasons that we've been able to be successful is the solid work that was done before I came on as executive director. So I can't take any credit for this, but it was work that was put in place by the town, in effect, to make sure that that artsPlace was something that was needed and wanted by the community. And then there was further consultation that made sure that the building was actually set up in a certain way that serviced the needs of that community. We have just been through our 3rd anniversary, so September 24th, 2015 was the actual official opening of artsPlace. So we've just celebrated our third anniversary, and at this point, we feel that it's really important that we continue that consultative process. We know very well what it is that people have taken, what they've wanted to take, what they have not taken. We know, how successful we've been delivering those programs in terms of an ongoing evaluation of our courses and instructors. But what we don't know is we're not currently offering to the community. So that's the purpose of that consultative process right now. And that process is now underway. We're hoping to have this completed. Originally it was by the end of October. We've kind of extended that through to November. We're currently in the in the 1st and 2nd stage of that. We've distributed a number of paper surveys, smaller paper surveys at community events over the summer, and we've also engaged in a longer online survey. So we have about 800 responses so far, and our goal is to have 1,100 responses. And the next step after that will be to take those results, do a thorough analysis, and then use some other community engagement tools to to dive deeper into exactly what programming we should be offering. And this is not, of course, only going to be looking at what the programming is, but it's going to be looking at what our capital needs will be going forward as well, too, of course. In order to offer those programs, we need to have a certain amount of infrastructure and the right equipment in place to do that.
The online surveys are entirely self-directed, correct?
Yeah.
How many of the postcard surveys have you?
So far we have about 300 of the postcard surveys completed and about 500 of the online surveys, and we're looking to get about another 300 of those online surveys completed. I'm not going to go into great amount of detail in terms of this budget, but what I will point out is a number of trends that we're looking at. What you'll see from this is that government. Sorry, let me back up here. This is a victim of not having my notes. But in terms of, we've been working very hard at developing a sustainable financial model. So that is built on 3 streams of revenue. One being earned revenue, which is made up of program fees, ticket sales, concession sales, facility rental revenue, etc. The second stream of that is contributed revenue, or for what we typically would call fundraising. So that's made up of, in our case, memberships, individual donations from individuals, corporate sponsorship, foundation contributions, as well as special events. And the third tranche of support, of course, is public sector funding, which currently you'll see that the town of Canmore funding is really the main focus of that. And I would like to emphasize that what you'll see from these numbers is that we are trending more towards contributed revenue and earned revenue as a model, and that is shifting from the government side of things. The government, there's not a lot of growth potential in government funding, so you're seeing that as a relatively flat part of that. But I will emphasize that the town support is a really key component of that funding. So, and for a number of reasons, and I think what you'll see is that we are fundamentally a community-based organization. We have a service agreement with the town to operate the Arts Center on behalf of the town for the benefit of the community. So the town funding from a government perspective is really an indicator and and a sign of leadership that other levels of government look at. Without the support that we receive from the town, we would not receive the same amount of support that we do now, and we certainly wouldn't have the opportunity to get increased funding from other levels of government as well too. Likewise, sponsors and donors look at that funding. They want to see that we have a balanced financial model, that we're a sustainable organization. And I think, and fundamentally, once again, they want to see that the people that are most engaged with us, so in essence, the citizens of this community, are providing support. So that is reflected in a number of different ways. One being, of course, the participation in the programs. Other way being directly through donation contributions, but also indirectly through the support from the town. And what that support from the town is fundamentally allowing us to do is to keep our programming accessible to as many people as possible. So it's this kind of continuing circle of life, if you will, to use a Disney analogy. Not a very good one, I had had.
So just before you move on from this slide,
Yeah.
if you're, a couple of questions. So essentially, your artsPlace doing, I would think we could characterize it as a good job of leveraging the funding from the town to acquire other levels of grants. And to your point, I know from other nonprofits that I sit on, the leveraging is critical. Part of acquiring other grant funds from other government grants as well as foundational grants and whatnot. The question, one of the questions I have is on the fundraising and membership line, the call it 200,000 projected for this year, going up to 255. So what percentage, if you can break it down, what percentage of that total is from fundraising, and what percentage would be then from memberships? So is that money largely?
Memberships represent between, currently it's around $25,000. So okay. It's a relatively small percentage of that.
So really,
so memberships are the kind of the non-tax receivable element of the fundraising that we do. So it's a kind of a lower level engagement with people, a way of getting them involved with us. So we offer some tangible benefits, such as discounts that means that we can't offer taxes. Essentially,
the growth that you're projecting in that line, income line, is largely attributed to increased success at fundraising.
It is, yes, it is. There's a 28% projected increase over the life cycle of this grant proposal. So.
And the number that you've fixed on as the town of Canmore grant as a percentage of total revenue, 21%, was that coincidental? I mean, is that what it was? So you might as well keep it at 21%, or is that, have there been discussions with town administration? I'm just curious how you focused in or zoned in on 21% as being the number.
Oh, it's a scientific number. That's
scientific.
You know,
wait a sec. This is arts.
It's actually it's kind of where it was, and that number is actually being going down as you'll notice our budget is going up. Yet that overall percentage that the town is providing is actually going down, and I have some other kind of slides that talk to how that ties into what that funding actually supports as well too. So I think it's a realistic look at where growth potential is. So I think it would be foolhardy for us to be looking at large percentage increases in any level of government funding. Our provincial funding is, if we can sustain that at the current levels, I think we'll be fortunate. There's small opportunities to increase funding on the federal level, and certainly project-based grants that we can apply for, mostly around capital funding on the provincial side as well too. But I think it's mostly just a reflection of what the realities are. So fundamentally, we're looking at sustaining our growth through those other tranches of funding, if you will. But the only area where there is opportunity for some limited growth is on the municipal, on the town, on the town level. So.
And you were still, or you were in the audience when I raised my cautionary note for the Museum Society that our budget this year is going to be particularly gruesome.
I have, that has been brought to my attention, yes.
Brought to your attention, okay, I'll just underline that.
Yeah.
And so we'll see where it goes when the budget actually comes to the Finance Committee initially for discussion, but of course there's no end of things we could spend more money on.
Well, and we've tried to be cognizant of that. So I'm kind of skipping ahead to some degree here, but I think what we're looking at is kind of inflationary increases to the basic grant. Then we've added in an incremental $5,000 grant to cover increased capital costs. So that's both as the building gets older, some of the original capital purchases will need to be replaced, but as we look at developing a new program, we're going to have to buy new things to cover that. So that $5,000 is not, we're not saying we're going to spend $5,000 more per year and want the town to cover it. That's actually represents a kind of a small percentage and actually a diminishing percentage of what those increased capital costs will be.
Great, thank you. Councillor, do you have questions about this part of the presentation? Okay, Councillor, well, Comfort first.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question. How many members do you have?
So we have between 250 and 300 members. I think it's, as I say, for us, it's a low-level fundraising thing rather than, say, a museum membership, which is really a different model. So, do you see that increasing, that membership fee increasing on kind of the same basis as other things increase? The actual charge to membership? Yeah. Well, I think we've kind of built in inflationary increases kind of across many lines. So, for instance, in our programming budgets, we're looking at an 11% growth over that time period, but also a 5% inflationary growth in that revenue line. So we're looking at similar numbers in terms of that membership growth. We're projecting kind of increases across the board on the fundraising side of things, but as any fundraiser worth their salt will tell you, what the real growth potential is in major gifts from individuals as opposed to, say, sponsorship and lower level kind of giving. So, if I may continue, another question.
Sure.
So, and also, it seems to me, artsPlace is just 3, right? It's just turned 3.
We're just 3. Sometimes it feels like we're about 30.
Still a toddler, then. Yeah. I'm thinking.
Yeah. So 8 years old if you include all the time we spent planning it.
We are. Kindergarten.
So it would seem to me that there were a number of things that were tried in the first 3 years in terms of programming, events, many things, and that now it's kind of settling out to what the most popular and the most in-demand programs are. Do you see that process continuing over the next while somewhat? So I guess what I'd like to see from our arts organization, although measured, is some amount of risk-taking and innovation and that sort of thing. But because otherwise people won't come, it'll be the same old, same old. So anyway, I just
no, and I totally agree with you, and I think there's a balance in everything, right? And I think I've always said that our job is to facilitate cultural, artistic, and creative exploration, and I think it's our job to make sure that we are servicing the needs of the community, but we're also pushing to some degree in terms of giving people the opportunity to try things that they haven't tried. That could be from a hands-on, participatory aspect, or it could be more experiential in terms of what the offerings that we have in the gallery, or some of the musical presentations or dance or theater-based presentations that we're showing in the theater. I think you know, the big mistake that a lot of people make is they try to push things too far, too fast. But we also have to be cognizant that we're very much a community organization, so we have to service those needs. You know, the point of the community consultation is not to validate what we think or what we want to do. It's to find out legitimately what the community wants to do. But I think there will be other priorities that we will set organizationally that we want to do, but obviously they have to be sustainable. And that, so for instance, things like our Indigenous programming does not have a huge revenue potential attached to it other than grants that we might receive from individuals or from foundations. And we've been relatively successful on that front as well too. The challenge there becomes to work with people and to build the relationships, and that takes time. And
well, it seems to me from the sidelines that it's been a very thoughtful process and a very inclusive process, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you. It's been the aspiration at any rate. So.
And I have another question about just the methodology of the survey.
Yeah.
You've got point 4 is open house World Cafe focus groups. When will that part happen?
So that's anticipated to take place probably in November.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. I'm always impressed at how you can leverage 21%.
I would emphasize I only made it through about halfway through, but I'm happy to answer your questions.
Well, so far you've done very well.
Yeah.
And I know that you don't have your notes handy, so.
That's true. It was a snappy
You've got 21% of town funds that you've leveraged into, so there's a significant amount of money that's coming in with a small input from the town, and that's really impressive. Can you tell us a little bit about the use of the prior year town funds and your strategy with that?
Yeah, so that was actually part of that presentation.
Are you coming up to it later? Okay, well, you can talk about it later.
Let's move on then.
I mean, this is just, this slide just really speaks to that model and how it remains consistent. You'll notice that the only real difference is there's that dark purple 2% slice there, which represents those prior year funds. And for those council members, newer council members, I think, those funds were left over from operating grants that we received before we opened, and because of the delays in getting the building built, we didn't actually need the operating funds. So a certain amount of those funds were returned to the town, and a certain amount of those funds were kept by the Canadian Mountain Arts Foundation.
You hid it away so we couldn't find it, if I recall.
Well, and the original intent was to build an operating reserve, but certain restrictions that this council put on those funds meant that we were actually, from an accounting perspective at any rate, we couldn't actually put it into an operating reserve. So anyway, so we are kind of finding ways to with the support of administration, to bring those funds more into operations. So in answer, sorry, Councillor Sanford, in answer to your question, so what we're actually looking at right now in terms of our strategic planning is building our capacity. Fundraising is not something that happens overnight. You have to, it's really all about building relationships. And in order to build those relationships, you need a certain amount of resources. In our case, we needed what I term a customer relationship management database. So a tool that will allow you to document and facilitate the building of those relationships. It doesn't do the work for you, but it's a tool that facilitates that process. The other main element that's required for fundraising success is actual human resources support. So you need bodies to do that. We've gone through a process in terms of hiring a part-time fundraiser, and the plan is to make that into a full-time fundraising position. Where we have used those funds from years past is to kind of provide gap funding for us. So we're bringing $24,000 of those funds into our operating budget this year to cover the costs of purchasing that database, plus the kind of the gap in terms of paying for that extra position. The plan, of course, is that position will more than pay for itself going forward and allow us to build the capacity that we have to raise funds, but those previous year funds are giving us the opportunity to kind of to fill that gap in the short term, and that is a diminishing amount as those funds are used up. So with the plan that we will kind of reach a norm in terms of the actual total funding that is being provided by the town. What we have, I think, in the spirit of the original service agreement with the town, the funds that we see those funds as covering what we call operating costs. So that really is the costs of running the facility, if you will. So if you take out fundraising costs, marketing costs, program delivery costs, and you're basically left with those operating costs, which I've itemized in this particular slide. And I think if you take into consideration those past year funds, the basic core operating funds plus the 5,000 we're asking extra in terms of capital replacement and enhancement funding, you'll see that the overall, that if you look at that right-hand column, the level of funding is remarkably flat over the 5 years of this request. And this is kind of broken down. Those 3 tranches here are broken down between the base with a 2.5% inflationary increase built into it, plus the use of prior year funds, which is the second column from the right, and then that small incremental capital request.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to just finish your...
That's it, I'm done.
Are you done your slides?
I'm done.
Perfect. Councillor Mara.
Thank you for your presentation, Jeremy. I'm just wondering, under other revenue, is your facility, like your music room, which I think is wonderful, is there an opportunity for the public to, outside of your programming, to use that facility and rent it from you?
Yeah, so it is, and I think I referenced kind of 100+ kind of relationship with 100% kind of community organizations, and a large chunk of that is people that are just coming in and renting the facility. So it's every, for instance, we had CORE International do a small fundraising presentation there over the weekend. We've had well, pretty much anybody you can imagine in terms of local groups coming in. A lot of them have been taking advantage of the kind of the audiovisual equipment we have in the facility that allows them to do that. But Innovate Canmore is going to be doing their launch, now delayed apparently, as well too. The Chamber of Commerce did their launch in the facility. So I think what you're seeing there is that not only through the programming that we're offering, but it's also really become a major hub in terms of conversations that are happening in the community. I mean, the town, the Mayor's Spotlight on the Arts is at artsPlace. One of the levels of the Olympic consultation took place at artsPlace. Other things on that level as well too. So it's really provided a great opportunity for people to come together and have those conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you outline fundraising for me? It's pretty impressive the amount of fundraising that you do.
How much time
2018,
do you have?
you're
We
109.
don't have any time left, so speak to him afterwards.
So, fundraising 101, built on a pyramid. You start at the bottom, you engage with people. A certain level of those people, we put in place a fundamental kind of financial engagement with them, which is our membership program. You take those people, you turn them into donors, you turn those people into major donors, you turn those people into major donors and advocates who go out and so that's how fundraising is fundamentally built. We have other opportunities, where we can bring in sponsorship as well too. So we've been quite successful in terms of having a lot of our programming streams, music streams, sponsored as well too. And the final element of that is probably special events. I caution against special events because they're a lot of work for not a lot of return, but we just had our Creative Combat fundraiser on the weekend. That's looking at netting somewhere around $32,000 for us. So that has kind of built from what was fundamentally just the opening party into actually a very sustainable fundraising event for us. Where you make money on events is through sponsorship. So we had a very active committee, and they brought in over $16,000 in direct sponsorship, and everybody from Collins Barrow to Three Sisters, and Home Hardware and all kinds of people that came through to support that through the work of a very strong
Great,
group.
and
So-
in this it talks about additional staffing to be able to
Yeah,
keep
and I
going
think,
after the
and that's,
fundraising.
I mean, if you look at fundraising models going forward, in order to, you have to spend money to make money. It's an old, you know, it's an old cliche, but it's true. So that's where you build, where you make your money is in building those relationships. So it's two buzzwords: cultivation and stewardship. So you have to build those relationships, find those new donors, people that are going to, and you bring them on board, and then you spend a lot of resources keeping those people close to you, and developing that relationship and developing that pool of money.
Great. See, that never took very long.
The very last question is, in the past, that fundraising role has been taken by a volunteer, is that correct?
So previously, if you look at the history of the Canadian Mountain Arts Foundation, which was, of course, around for many years before I was a twinkle in anybody's eye, any kind of fundraising work was done by that, and I think we had a particular individual on the board who kind of did a lot of great work in terms of building the infrastructure around that, so a lot of the materials, kind of fundraising planning, but it's really been since we brought on a professional staff. So initially it was kind of me doing all the fundraising, and then we brought on someone that was doing communications and fundraising, then we brought on someone exclusive to that, and these are not new positions, it's just kind of shifting of positions, and then we're looking towards having a full-time fundraising person. Currently it's a 3-day-a-week position, so it's between that person and what I do, and then also with the support of our board-based fundraising committee as well too, and other people on the board.
Great. Well, thanks very much for being here today. You've heard my cautionary note a few times. I won't repeat it. Thanks very much, Mr. Elbrin.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council.
Thank you. With that, I'll look to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole, September 11th. If there are any errors or omissions, seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on to item D1, the summer fare-free Canmore local transit pilot. Mr. Asarte.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here today to provide an update on the summer fare-free pilot and to suggest next steps for that initiative. So brief agenda, we'll talk about how the pilot fit into community plans and our strategic plans, look at the evaluation of the results, and then discuss future opportunities and have an opportunity for some discussion. The pilot was undertaken in response to Council's 2019 through 22 strategic plan. In the strategic plan, Council set out a strategic priority to look at options for funding fare-free transit, which included potentially pricing some of our parking some of the time. This strategy represents a shifting of the incentive structure that we have in place right now, and that's widely considered best practice in terms of transportation management. It's a recognition that strategies that effectively encourage people to take some of their trips, some of the time by foot, bicycle, and transit are essential here in Canmore for creating room on our limited road network for those that need to and want to drive. In order to reduce growth and congestion and potentially reverse it, we have strategies that tackle land use and transportation outlined in our integrated transportation plan and our integrated parking management plan. And these strategies include regional and local transit enhancements over the coming decade, including the recommendation for fare-free transit, in order to achieve a 5% transit mode share during our peak summer times. Some of the key recommendations include those regional and local improvements. And together with increases in walking and cycling, this higher transit ridership results in a manageable congestion picture, accounting for the growth we'll see over the next decade. So in 2018, Council set a strategy, Council has approved strategic plans, and then acted on these plans through approval of the pilot for fare-free transit. The goal of the pilot was to gauge what the impact of this initiative, what it would be on our system. And we expected from extensive research that's been done that each community would be unique, but that we could expect an increase in ridership of between 20 and 60%. At the time of the pilot, ridership was trending 35% over our 2017 levels. And immediately after pilot initiation, there was a sharp increase, as has been reported on. July saw an increase of 102% year over year, and August 124% year over year, for a total increase of 110% over last year during the pilot. And there was an observable trend towards continued increases in year-over-year growth as the pilot progressed. The research that had been undertaken was suggesting 20 to 60% ridership increase within several months. So we were likely not at a point where we were necessarily seeing a complete picture of what those increases could look like. Nevertheless, it was a positive trend, and that trend reversed abruptly upon conclusion of the pilot. In the first month post-pilot, with fares reintroduced, riderships trended back to the baseline and a little below. So we had a direct correlation between the introduction of fare-free period, an uptake in ridership, and this trend was consistent both year over year and in terms of what we were projecting for this year. And so we can, with some confidence, say that a 75% year-over-year increase in ridership can be attributed to our fare-free pilot, and that represented a 50% increase versus our trend, and that's consistent with the higher end of expected ridership increases from that previous research. So a thought on what we're seeing here. Are we that price sensitive that 2% would have such a dramatic increase? And I think it's helpful to look at the ways that people travel in aggregate to help understand. So who's using transit now? We know from our statistics that more than 2/3 of our riders are pass riders. So when we look at, this is a spectrum of people traveling in the community, people on the right tending to make more of their trips by foot, bicycle, and transit, those on the left making the majority of their trips by car. What we're seeing is that most transit trips presently are being taken by those with passes. So they're likely high transit users. They get a lot of value from purchasing a pass. For them, the effort of attaining a pass and maintaining their pass is worth it because they're regularly using transit. And so there's value for them in doing that. When we look at our required travel splits and all of our strategies, we're working towards enabling people to make at least some of their trips by transit. So fare-free transit's targeting those who are willing to make some of their trips by transit. The family of 3 or 4 who might be looking to make 1 or 2 trips, but that $12 or $16 round trip, from an incentive perspective, they would simply drive. Or a family of visitors or part-time residents who aren't going to own a membership or purchase a pass, but would certainly, on occasion, take a shuttle bus, for example, if it was convenient to do so. So that's what I think is happening here. It's just representing that portion of people, and it's creating that shift that we're looking to create where more and more people are enabled to travel in different ways for at least some of their trips. In terms of the operating impacts, there's currently plenty of spare capacity on our system. We don't anticipate that in the foreseeable future having additional ridership because of fare free would result in needing additional buses or drivers. The capacity's there. We're currently recovering a relatively small percentage of our total transit costs from fares. And we would have generally neutral operating impacts otherwise. So when you look at a comparison of communities, Canmore's conditions are ideal for introducing fare free. We're not recovering a lot through fares. We've got a lot of capacity. We're not going to see operating impacts other than foregoing fares by introducing this initiative.
Can you remind me what the full operational cost is at this point?
I believe for a local system, it's somewhere in the 700,000 to 800,000 range.
Somewhere around 7 or 8, right. Look what's in your report.
So for next steps, we're looking to include recommendations and options in the operating budget for council consideration. And as part of that, identifying potential revenue sources. As the mayor's mentioned, this is a challenging budget year. And
you were listening too.
Yes.
Good.
I was really listening, as you'll see in a sec. And as part of that, evaluating the potential to price some of the parking downtown some of the time. And that was looked at as part of the parking management plan. So certainly a number of synergistic strategies here with what is looking like significant potential to contribute towards council goals around congestion and managing parking. With that, I'll open to questions and discussion.
Nice photo, look at that. Yeah, see, people are learning, yeah. Okay, are there any questions from members of council? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you for your presentation and the report. I just had a couple questions. One of the main reasons, or part of the reason in your summary, is to manage traffic and congestion. Do you have any information on how it affected the downtown or any congestion around town having free transit? Any data or?
Our best data is our transit data, and so 9,000 trips were taken that we have assessed as being attributable to the pilot. Of those trips, it's difficult to determine what percentage are induced trips, so trips people wouldn't have otherwise taken, what percentage would have been people who would have walked or bicycled otherwise, and what percentage would be attributable to driving. So we don't have a great sense of the direct impact on congestion with the pilot data at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Sarte. That was essentially my question too, is how transit may have affected parking. Did you get any anecdotal feedback from people this summer about how parking may have improved? I think it improved because I generally drive and I generally park. And so I think it did have an impact on it. But did you hear from any people in the community?
I haven't anecdotally. My anecdotal information is generally not rosy that I would receive.
You only get complaints, you don't get positive
right.
feedback.
If things improve, I don't get phone calls for some reason. So we don't, but that's certainly something we could measure in terms of utilization, parking utilization in the future, as part of looking at this again. And
in the report, it suggests that the increase you would be asking for, or that would be recommended for fare free, would be from $786,000 to $888,000, so that's $100,000 approximately. So that would be the difference of what fare free would have an impact on. But then we would have to figure out what the funding model would be. And you also mentioned that there would be paid parking at some point, potentially, to offset that $100,000.
That's what we're presently looking at as part of the parking management plan, is looking at what parking may be priced, when it would be priced, what that price would be.
And that's not for 2018 yet? That's not implementable this year?
No, it would be, likely anything we're looking at would be for a portion of the parking for peak season only. So it would be during the summer season. So the earliest we would consider implementing is, or recommending to council to implement is for next summer. And we're just looking at different ways to roll out fare free, whether we do it seasonally initially. Ultimately, though, we want to move to a sustainable model where we can fund year-round, so that we can see that trend continue and we can start to compound through growth the benefit of the fare free and get as quickly as possible to maximize our ridership. So at this point, it's pulling those pieces of information. What are the costs for a partial fare free, seasonal fare free? How much can we expect to generate in different scenarios for paid parking?
And would we have that as a budget consideration, do you think, or?
That's the intent, is to include it as part of the operating budget consideration for council this fall.
Okay, good, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Asarte? Seeing none, thanks very much for your presentation. Not surprising to hear that ridership went up when it was free. And I certainly took advantage of that when my granddaughter was here, and she's still talking about it. Woo. We'll move on to E1, council updates. And I'll just throw it open for any member of council who wants to ask any other member of council a question. And I'll ask Councillor Comfort one or two questions. You note the planning continues for the mayor spotlight. Do you know what the date was going to be this time?
Oh, good question.
Okay. May? Like, okay, just not in my calendar yet, I don't think. On your report on the ERC, the Environmental Advisory Review Committee. So ERC was discussing the possibility of fencing parks as a result of the report that was issued in May. Is that?
Yes, that's part of the report. Sorry. It was mostly in terms of informing the committee rather than asking for feedback or anything, and then catch up on the roundtable.
Okay. So that was something that was brought to ERC by
Lori, the
sustainability.
Is that her title? Sustainability coordinator.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Your Worship, I had a question as well for Councillor Comfort about the sorry, it's so tempting. With regards to the organics collection, I see here that the 2019 budget includes capital requests for infrastructure related. I also know that our current recycling diversion has not been picked up as much as we would like from the public. How is that going in terms of our statistics?
I actually don't know. Again, it was something that is of interest to the committee, and Lori was just catching us up with something that's going to come forward at budget. And I guess we'll be provided with more information at the time of budget as to how that's working.
Okay.
I gather that there's still problems in the processing of it, and I know we've discussed it at the Bow Valley Waste Management Commission as well. It's not as straightforward as people seem to think it should be and would hope it to be. It's not a matter of keeping a pail by the stove or by the, cutting board and putting your peelings in it. It's a lot more complicated.
I was less concerned about the organics piece, and I was more curious about how our actual waste diversion in terms of recycling, how we were doing as a community in terms of the statistics overall in our benchmarking.
Benchmarking.
Yeah.
That's likely to be something we'll be able to find from administration in the
I just
future?
assumed that there's that, the name of the document is escaping me, that IRC, thank you, the ESAP document is something where those benchmarks have been, or goals have been put in that document, and that's sort of the document of the IRC committee, their little Bible. So I was wondering in terms of how, but clearly that's not something you've discussed recently, so I apologize.
I think ESAP's coming up for another look, like a review. So, and I can find out about that and get back to you also.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm back to the mayor spotlight. It's May 4th, and
May
it's
4th.
the 15th year anniversary, so it will be a retrospective.
Ooh.
May the 4th.
Great. Okay, everybody better get their tickets. Councillor Sanford, just you and I talked on the way back from Red Deer about SEWA. I wondered if you could just share with the rest of council a brief update on what's happening with SEWA.
Yes, thank you for that question. I'm sorry I missed the last Bow Valley Waste Management Commission meeting. So I asked Councillor Ryan to update me because he is the director of SEWA. So his information that he gave to me was that there was an AGM on September 14th, and the only thing they did at the AGM was to elect the new directors. The process is moving forward. However, they have 2 grant applications into municipal affairs currently. The deadline for the grant applications is November 1st. And after they determine how much funding they get, they're going to move forward and put the question to the members, Town of Canmore being one of them, as to what direction SEWA is going to take, whether it's going to be a utility-based model or whether they're going to go through a P3 process and have private investors come in with a capital plan. So things are kind of on hold until they get the grant applications determined, whether they get the funding for the next phase of it. But it is moving forward. It's just moving forward at a pace that they have to acknowledge that there are processes that are in place that they need to respond to. So the grant application deadline of November 1st will make a difference, and then we'll go forward. And I think your other question was, what was the funding model? And it's 40 cents per capita for each community that's a member of SEWA, and the Bow Valley Waste Management Commission pays that on behalf of the town of Canmore. So that's all I know at this point. There will be another meeting to pose that question to the members, and I will be intending to attend that meeting when that comes up. So that's all I know.
Okay, so in that future time when there's a response from the senior level of government about funding, one option is not simply to fold it up and call it a day?
I don't think we're at that point. There is a lot of interest in the process because ultimately landfills in Alberta will be filled and closed. So there's going to have to be some other process of waste management, and this is potentially a long-term future project. However, there is enough interest at this point from a P3 agency that we may be able to go forward with private investors. However, that changes our position as members because then we would have to be paying a different rate if a private corporation was to build it. So it's not folding up. No, it's moving forward, and it'll just be determined what direction is going to be used because this will be something that will likely be needed in the future. So,
great, thanks very much. Any other questions from members of council for the members of council? Councillor McCallum?
I just wanted to provide a correction. I'm just looking at my committee of the whole blurb, and I'm realizing that under the statistics where it says rent supplement program, it's 36 clients, not 6 clients, so my apologies.
Okay.
Well, considering it's a $20,000 a month budget, that looks kind of bad. Or $20,000 a year budget, that looks kind of bad.
Any other questions at this time? Seeing none, I will move on to F1 service area reports. Start with Section A, the CAO's office. Just have curious a bit more detail under General Manager of Municipal Services, 3B. It notes experiencing that aquatics is experiencing several stressors, leading to the need to bring in an outside expert. Can you share with us what that is?
Yeah, so that it's largely around staffing turnover and workload. And so we're really trying to understand, are there things about, I mean, the pool is one of those places where, you know, it's a matter of life and death. So anytime, and we do have regular life-saving audits by the Life Saving Society to look at our operations on the deck. So we're very good in terms of knowing about numbers of people in the pool and numbers of guards on the deck and where they're placed, and we can adjust based on that kind of demand. But there's also significant issues around training that our staff have to have, and then we tend to have a lot of turnover. There's a lot of casual staff in that department, and so when we have a significant number of casual staff who move on, and are no longer there, then that can sort of backload us. So we're just trying to understand how we can manage not so much the safety of the pool, but the workload around managing the safety of the pool, and how the department is structured so that there's a bit more consistency and a bit less workload stress and stress around staff change and turnover. We're always going to have a lot of casual staff in that department. It's just the nature of the work. Yep. But when we see significant shifts in turnover, you know, there's a domino effect. So we're just trying to get a handle on different ways of thinking about that and creative ways to organize it. Some of this was connected to the org review that'll be coming to council next month. So we've just sort of sped up this look at aquatics based on the circumstance, but it fits with some of the other things that the org review will recommend. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Just a note, I guess, under B1, the community social development, and we talked a bit about this agenda review. Just, it's not a problem if the grant budget isn't fully expended, so we've shared that with the manager. Councillor McCallum.
I had a question with regards to I've actually got a lot of questions today, holy moly. The meeting that the General Manager of Municipal Services was able to have with the CAO with our Stoney Nakoda neighbors and discussions around the Olympics. I was wondering if you were able to detail what those discussions around the Olympics look like.
Yeah, so I think the Olympics precipitated the interest in the discussion. You know, we were, so Ms. DeSoto and I went to this meeting and were very clear that we were not there representing the BIDCO or the Olympic bid. So, you know, the Stoney Nakoda are certainly interested in the opportunities that the Olympics provides the Valley. We could not speak on behalf of the BIDCO, but we did commit that as neighbors, as the bid progresses, and if there is a bid, and if we're successful in the bid, that we wanted to be good neighbors. And even if there's not a bid, what we realized through the discussion is that there's a lot of things we have going on, a new economic development manager, transportation initiatives. There are several things that we just have shared interest in. So we didn't actually focus that much on the Olympics because we couldn't speak to the bid. What we could speak to was what it meant to be a good neighbor and some of the things that we have an interest in sharing, of which the Olympics are one. So it was largely a relationship building, but we are going to try to move forward with getting their council and our council together likely in the new year of 2019. Yeah, so there weren't really any specifics. The Olympics caused the meeting to happen, but it wasn't really the focus once we got there. Yeah.
Actually, I think a meeting like this has been discussed for 6 or 8 months outside of the Olympic, nothing to do with the Olympics. It's as a result of a letter from Stoney Nakoda to town of Canmore 6 or 8 months ago. Yeah, so there's a number of things on the table there. You had another question, Councillor McCallum?
I do. I don't know if you're that far along in the...
No, let's just go for it.
All right, so protective services, the iDrive Safely program ended as of the end of this summer. So if council's interested in inserting that back into the budget, then we have to have that discussion at budget. Is correct? Okay. And then my next question was regards to communications. Hold on, I don't know if I passed it or not.
Where's that?
Have I passed it, Your Worship? Sorry.
Okay, C2, corporate services. Page 4 of that report.
Yes, thank you. So again, an Olympic-related question. So I met a gentleman here last week from the province. I guess I didn't understand that and maybe I still don't understand, that the participating governments are the ones that are actually bringing the communication expertise to the table as opposed to the big corporation having their own communication staff? Or am I not understanding it correctly?
Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, so there's actually both. So there's a weekly call right now that involves all the partners that are there, and so that's the communication staff for all of the agencies. And the BIDCO's been getting their communication staff up and running right now.
Oh, they're just getting up and running right now?
Yeah.
Interesting, okay. And so are there any other departments that are engaged in this kind of work outside of just providing general expertise on the front end on what the Olympics could look like in Canmore? It's not anything that's running off the side of someone's desk. I just assumed it was the CAO at this point, based on the discussions we've had.
Yeah, so thank you. So it is the CAO largely, and then as Adam mentioned, Robin, our communication manager, is on a weekly call.
Okay.
And then we have an Olympic steering committee meeting, which is supposed to be every week, but it's not that often. It's probably twice a month, of the CAO, the GMs, the manager of communication, the manager of finance, and when he's available, Jim Yonker, who's seconded to the Olympics. So other staff might be brought in for a consult or an opinion or to provide expertise, but that's really it in terms of workload. It's largely the CAO.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if it's becoming part of our core service delivery, then we need to hive that off and be
Not yet.
clear about it. Thank you. Did I have more? I did. I have many more,
I'll
but I'll let
interrupt
somebody
with-
else ask.
I just wanted, actually not a question, just an observation, a shout out under recreation services. It notes community cruisers were contributing to the affordable services program by providing kids bikes at no cost.
That's awesome.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
Totally the best. Yeah, that's awesome.
Way to go, community cruisers. They're watching. Had a question under finance. The whole bit about the CARB, the Condo Corp appeal and all. Do you know when that's going to be? It has to come back to CARB. Do you know when that's going to happen? Pardon me? Councillor Sanford.
I sat on that CARB with Councillor Krausert at the time, former Councillor Krausert, and it's going to come back to CARB sometime in late January or mid-February, and they've asked the original CARB members to participate. So he and I have been asked to participate again to review that that hearing, and we have to consider a different question now because it's bylaw related as opposed to what was considered in the first round. So sometime January, February.
Great, thank you. Councillor McCallum, did you have another question?
P&D, and it's just on the BC Ag. So is it my understanding that the MD of Bighorn is no longer a participant in any way, shape, or form with the BC Ag?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then I had a question about in engineering, but we can wait to get there if other people have questions on the other parts.
Councillor Sanford?
Can I ask a question about Fire Smart home assessments? How can the general public get involved in Fire Smart home assessments?
So mostly they just need to contact the fire department if you're interested in having one. But as it mentions, it is on a as capacity allows basis. But if people are interested in something, they just need to contact the fire department directly and they'll set it up as possible.
Okay. Is there a program that's been set up, or is it?
Former Chief Sikorsky had presented this to council a little bit more than a year ago. There is kits that are available and sort of an assessment tool, not that we created, just that's part of the Fire Smart program.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using that template, and it's things that Stu Walkinshaw also has a lot of expertise in helping, although we're not necessarily using him to deliver the program. But it is larger Fire Smart materials. The program is Fire Smart materials, not Canmore developed materials.
And so the fire department comes out and someone from the fire department will come and go through it with a homeowner?
Not through, but
walk the perimeter.
It's in the yard, basically, yes,
Okay.
and talk with the homeowner about it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just contact the fire
Contact
department.
fire. Mhm.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor McCallum.
Engineering services, the Railway Ave project, capital project 1534. It speaks to a large stakeholder meeting that was had, and that invitations were sent out and a total of 20 individuals attended. What is that 20 representative of? Are there like 50 stakeholders? Are there 25 stakeholders?
Mr. Fark?
Well, in terms of the number of stakeholders those 20 people represent, I don't know that there's a clear answer to that.
Okay.
There were residents, business owners, so representing the different types of stakeholders that are along the corridor
Okay.
were involved, yes.
Okay, so I guess I'm trying to understand, was engineering happy with that turnout, or were they like, oh, I wish more people had come, or?
No, I think engineering has been very happy with the level of engagement we've had so far.
Okay, good.
The discussions have been positive and constructive.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was on 1657. What is the stone pitching method? All I could imagine was some Swiss dude at the top of an alluvial fan, like hucking rocks.
It's a
And
little
yodeling.
more complicated than that,
Well, then explain.
but just marginally.
Okay.
So as opposed to, you're familiar with the concept of riprap,
Yep.
which is essentially just the piling of rocks along the erosion bank. So stone pitching is actually, we set the rocks within sort of a slurry, like a concrete mix, so that they are actually held in much firmer, right? So the chances of erosion, so what we saw in 2013 was there were places where the riprap actually got carried away by the flooding. And so the stone pitching is a more resilient and hardened surface, and it involves more than simply piling the rocks up. There's actual placement of the rock and a compacting of the material around it to hold it firmly in place.
All right, interesting. Thank you very much. And those are all my questions, Your Worship.
I have one on Councillor Sanford.
Speaking of stone pitching, do we get to have a tour? Council likes to go on tours of things like that.
Stone pitching?
We want to see the mitigation.
If you would like to see stone pitching, we are certainly happy to show you that to you at any time you like.
Yes. Please invite us on a tour, and
A
we'd be happy to
stone
go.
pitching tour. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm making a note.
I can just visualize it, I can imagine it, so don't worry about sending me the invite.
Other members of council, or is this a Councillor Sanford thing? And Councillor Seeley. Okay. I will have Suzette set up something for Councillor Sanford and Seeley.
Is this something they could just walk up the creek and see on their own?
Certainly it is. Yes.
So do we need staff resources to look at it? Okay, if that's fine. Maybe there's more to it than I figure. Perhaps. Just want to note under solid waste services, the grade 4 tour. That's great that we're touring the grade 4s, 7 classes through the Waste Management Center. Is that something that's happened in years past?
Yes.
Always, like it's a regular for grade 4? That's great. So grade 4, they do waste management, and grade 6, they talk to the mayor. I like it. Just coincidentally, Councillor Sanford and I had been talking about this on the way back from Red Deer. We had a lot of time to talk. In the from the context of how much we get out of the tours we take of the waste management and other facilities as well, we members of council, and we weren't sure if there was any opportunity for general public to arrange for or take a tour. Is that something that's done regularly as well? No?
No.
One thought,
Again, staff resources.
sure. One thought that we had, I thought brilliant, didn't you, Councillor Sanford? Is to, we could, and I could talk with the biosphere about this, but the biosphere regularly works with the students, Lawrence Grassy, like grade 6 or so, and they do short little videos of various things, and so the kids are having fun, and they produce a pretty interesting video, and might be something that we could work with Biosphere to get a little video done by the kids of the, specifically think of the Waste Management Center, that could go online, and members of the public could then find out a bit more about it. Just a thought.
I was going to say, that sounds like a wonderful initiative that the mayor could lead in a conversation with the Biosphere.
Yeah, it would be the Biosphere that would actually lead it, but now there's a new director there. I'll throw that out as a bone for her, and she can take it and run.
There you go. So we are not taking that as a direction from administration
No,
to engage
not a
in
good
that.
God. No, I wouldn't want to add to your burden.
Just to be clear.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding service area reports? Seeing none. Just looking at the council resolution action list, and that motion from 2014 was last updated early 2017. I mean, we've talked about this before, but sooner or later it might be worth bringing something like that back to council for rescinding or something. It doesn't appear that we're ever going to get to that motion. This is having to do with setting annual limits for conversion of visitor accommodation on Bow Valley Trail. I think we've gone past that discussion.
Yeah, so our perspective of administration is that we are addressing that through the land use bylaw updates that will be coming forward at a council session sometime in the near future. And this will form part of that picture, but certainly that particular motion is something that we would look to have rescinded by council at that time, or a motion essentially suggesting that it has been addressed, because the situation has changed considerably.
So if it's not addressed through the land use bylaw updates, then council could arguably rescind the motion?
Council could arguably rescind the motion, as we actually don't believe that it's relevant any longer, that particular motion.
Yeah.
The circumstances have changed somewhat considerably. But as indicated, the tackling of the whole visitor accommodation tourist home issue is one that we are looking to address at some point, probably in 2019.
And in the same context, motion 157, 2015, it notes no further work is planned. So will that fall off of this council resolution action list? I want Mr. Fish to take a question, since he made the effort of coming all the way in here.
No, and Mr. Fish should probably not be, yes.
Pardon me?
Mr. Fish does not need to come up there.
I just want him to feel needed.
So we are looking at amendments to the land use bylaw, and we will address it through those amendments, I would suggest.
Okay. All right, and I hear you. Let it go. Anything on the Bow Valley Regional Housing Bulletin? Now, we're going to go in cameras. Pardon me? Oh, not until 3. Okay. So that was my question. So I'll move council be adjourned for 25 minutes. I mean, committee of the whole be adjourned for 25 minutes. Those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.